The flame of Adelaide's homestead crackled mockingly as Olivia Matthews collapsed to her knees in the dirt, her hands shaking as she tried to cover her face from the intense heat. The cabin, her only sanctuary in this harsh territory, was nothing but a skeleton of charred wood and dying embers. 3 days had passed since the fire, but she still couldn't bring herself to leave the burned-out shell that had once been her home. Montana Territory, 1876. The unforgiving summer sun beat down on Olivia's sunburnt shoulders as she huddled against the only standing post of what used to be her front porch. Her dress, once a cheerful blue calico, was now smudged with soot and dirt. She'd been surviving on wild berries and the few scraps she'd managed to salvage from the root cellar, which had partially survived the blaze. But those meager provisions were now gone. At 22, Olivia had already endured more tragedy than most faced in a lifetime. Orphaned at 16, she had married young to Timothy Matthews, who'd promised her security and companionship. They'd ventured west together with dreams of building a life far from the crowded streets of St. Louis. But just 6 months after establishing their homestead, Timothy had been thrown from his horse while checking fence lines. The doctor from the nearest town had arrived too late. For nearly 2 years, Olivia had persevered alone, determined to honor Timothy's memory by maintaining their claim. She'd learned to hunt small game, tend their modest vegetable garden, and repair the cabin's roof. The nearest town, Silver Creek, was a half-day's ride away, and she'd made the journey once a month for supplies and human contact. But now, with her home destroyed and her strength fading, Olivia realized she might not survive another night. The thought of giving up felt like a betrayal, but her parched lips and hollow stomach reminded her that pride meant nothing to the dead. As the sun began its descent behind the jagged mountains to the west, Olivia heard the distinct sound of hoofbeats approaching. Her heart quickened. In these parts, a stranger could mean salvation or danger. She had nothing left to steal except her life, but that didn't mean someone wouldn't try. She struggled to stand, her legs weak from hunger and exhaustion. Squinting against the setting sun, she made out the silhouette of a single rider approaching at a steady pace. Her hand instinctively reached for Timothy's old revolver, only to remember it had been lost in the fire. The rider slowed as he neared the remains of the cabin. He was tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered and wearing a wide-brimmed hat that cast shadows across his face. His horse, a sturdy chestnut gelding, snorted and pawed at the ground as they came to a stop several yards from where Olivia stood. "Madam," the man's voice was deep but gentle. "You need some help here," Olivia tried to respond, but her dry throat produced only a raspy whisper. The edges of her vision darkened and she felt herself swaying. The last thing she remembered was the stranger dismounting in a hurry, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the ground. When Olivia regained consciousness, she was lying on a bedroll beneath a canvas tarp stretched between trees. A small campfire crackled nearby, and the aroma of coffee and cooking meat made her stomach clench painfully. She tried to sit up, but dizziness forced her back down. "Easy there," said the same deep voice she'd heard earlier. "You're safe, but you need to take it slow." The stranger moved into her field of vision, kneeling beside her with a tin cup of water. In the firelight, she could see him clearly for the first time. He appeared to be in his late 20s, with weathered skin that spoke of years under the open sky. His eyes, a striking shade of green, watched her with concern. A few days' worth of stubble darkened his jaw, and his dark hair curled slightly where it emerged from beneath his hat. "Nathan Rutherford," he said, helping her take small sips from the cup. "Most folks call me Nate." "Olivia," she managed after drinking. "Olivia Matthews." "Well, Mrs. Matthews, looks like you've had a rough go of it." He glanced toward the remains of her cabin. "That fire happened recently, 3 days ago," she whispered, her voice still weak. "Lightning strike. It spread so fast I barely got out." Nathan nodded, his expression grim. "You've been out here alone since then, no neighbors or kin nearby?" Olivia shook her head, the simple movement requiring more effort than it should have. "Nearest neighbor is 5 miles. Haven't had the strength to make it that far." I'm heading to my ranch about 10 miles west of here, Nathan said, returning to the fire to check on whatever was cooking in his small cast iron skillet. It's not much, but there's a roof and walls. You're welcome to recuperate there until you figure out your next steps. Under normal circumstances, Olivia would have hesitated to accept such an offer from a stranger, but these were not normal circumstances. She was starving, homeless, and had nowhere else to turn. Why would you help me? She asked, caution mingling with desperation. Nathan turned back to her, his expression softening. My ma would rise from her grave and tan my hide if I rode past someone in need. He offered a small smile. Besides, out here, folks have to look out for one another. The land's hard enough without adding human cruelty to the mix. He served her a small portion of pan-fried rabbit, warning her to eat slowly. Your stomach's shrunk. Too much too fast will make you sick. As Olivia forced herself to take small, measured bites, she studied her rescuer. There was something in his manner that put her at ease, a quiet confidence that didn't demand attention. His clothes were well worn but clean. A faded blue shirt, dark canvas pants, and a leather vest that had seen years of use. The revolver holstered at his hip looked well maintained, and she noticed a Winchester rifle secured to his saddle. You said you have a ranch, she asked between careful bites. Nathan nodded. Nothing grand. Started with 40 acres 3 years ago, up to about 100 now. Running a small herd of cattle, enough to get by. You work it alone. Got a hand who helps with the bigger jobs, Carlos Mendoza. Good man. He's got a small cabin on the property. Nathan poured himself more coffee. And there's Sadie, my hound. Best cattle dog this side of the Mississippi, if you ask me. The simple conversation was a balm to Olivia's spirit. After days of silence and fear, the sound of another human voice felt like a miracle. When she finished eating, Nathan insisted she rest while he tended to the horses and prepared for the next day's journey. We'll head out at first light, he said. It'll be easier on you if we travel before the day gets too hot. Olivia wanted to help with the camp chores to prove she wasn't completely helpless, but her body betrayed her. The moment she laid back down, exhaustion claimed her, and she fell into the deepest sleep she'd had since before the fire. When dawn broke, Olivia woke to find Nathan already up, his camp nearly packed. He'd left out only what was needed for a quick breakfast, more coffee and hardtack softened in the hot liquid. How are you feeling this morning? He asked, noticing she was awake. Olivia sat up slowly, taking stock of her body. She was still weak, but the food and rest had done her good. Better, she said honestly. Thank you for stopping, Mr. Rutherford. I'm not sure I would have lasted another day out here. Nate, he corrected gently, and there's no need for thanks. I'm just glad I came along when I did. He hesitated, then added, I hope you don't mind, but while you were sleeping, I checked what was left of your cabin. Not much survived the fire, I'm afraid. Olivia felt a pang of loss but nodded. I'd already looked through most of it. Everything's gone, clothes, supplies, even Timothy's letters. Timothy, my husband. Olivia looked down at her hands where her wedding band still encircled her finger, now tarnished from the smoke. He passed almost 2 years ago, horse accident. Nathan's expression softened with understanding. I'm sorry to hear that. Losing someone out here, it's not easy. There was something in his tone that suggested personal knowledge of such loss, but Olivia didn't press. Everyone in these territories carried their own burdens of grief. After breakfast, Nathan helped Olivia onto his horse, then led the animal by the reins. Though she protested that she could walk, he insisted she conserve her strength. My ranch isn't exactly equipped for a lady's comfort, he warned as they made their way west, leaving behind the smoldering remains of her old life. But there's a spare room that should serve until you're back on your feet. The journey took most of the morning. As they traveled, Olivia observed the changing landscape. The flat, grassy terrain gradually gave way to gently rolling hills dotted with pine trees. They followed a small creek for several miles before cresting a rise that revealed Nathan's ranch in the valley below. It was, as he described, modest but well-maintained. A sturdy log cabin with a stone chimney stood as the main house, with a barn and corral nearby. A smaller cabin, presumably where Carlos lived, was situated a short distance away. Several dozen cattle grazed in the pastures beyond, and as they approached, a black and white border collie raced out to meet them, barking excitedly. "That's Sadie," Nathan said with obvious affection. "Don't worry, she's all bark with new folks." The dog circled them enthusiastically, but kept a respectful distance from the horses. As they neared the main cabin, a man emerged shorter than Nathan but broad-shouldered, with a thick mustache and sun-darkened skin. "Nate." "Didn't expect you back so soon," he called in accented English, his expression curious as he noticed Olivia. "Change of plans, Carlos," Nathan replied, bringing the horse to a stop. "This is Mrs. Matthews. Her place burned down a few days back. Mrs. Matthews, this is Carlos Mendoza." Carlos removed his hat respectfully. "Madam, sorry to hear about your trouble." Nathan helped Olivia dismount, supporting her when her legs threatened to give way. "Carlos, could you see to the horses? I'm going to help Mrs. Matthews get settled." "Of course," Carlos agreed, taking the reins. "I'll bring in your packs after." The inside of Nathan's cabin was simple but surprisingly neat. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a solid wooden table, several chairs, and a small sofa covered with a woven blanket. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and shelves held books, tools, and household items. 2 doors led to what Olivia assumed were bedrooms. "That one's yours," Nathan said, gesturing to the door on the right. "It's not much, but it's private. Bathroom's the outhouse just behind the cabin. We haul water from the pump for washing up." He opened the bedroom door, revealing a small but clean space with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small window that let in the afternoon light. "This was your room?" Olivia asked, noting that someone had obviously been using it. Nathan nodded. "I'll take the sofa. Been sleeping on the ground half my life anyway. Sofa's a luxury by comparison." "I can't put you out of your bed," Olivia protested. "You're not putting me anywhere. I'm offering." His tone was gentle but firm. "Rest. I'll see about finding you some clean clothes. Might have to make do with some of mine until we can get to town." Left alone, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, overcome with conflicting emotions. Relief at finding shelter and help warred with grief over all she had lost and shame at being so dependent on a stranger's charity. She was used to managing on her own, to facing hardship with quiet determination. Being rescued, needing to be rescued, left her feeling vulnerable in ways that made her uncomfortable. Yet beneath that discomfort was profound gratitude. She knew what happened to women left destitute in these territories. Nathan Rutherford had offered help with no apparent expectation of return, treating her with a respect that preserved her dignity even in her lowest moment. As she heard him moving about in the main room, Olivia made a silent promise to herself. She would accept his help for now, recover her strength, and then find a way to repay his kindness. She had no intention of becoming a permanent charity case. Somehow, she would rebuild her life. But first, she needed to rest. Lying back on the bed, she allowed herself the luxury of closing her eyes without fear for the first time in days. The sound of Sadie barking outside, of men's voices as Nathan and Carlos worked in the yard, created a strange new lullaby that carried her into dreamless sleep. When Olivia woke, the quality of light through the window suggested late afternoon. She found a basin of water, soap, and a towel had been placed on the chest of drawers, along with a man's shirt, a pair of trousers that had been taken in with rough stitches, and a leather belt. A note in a surprisingly neat hand read, "These might fit better than your burned clothes." Supper at sundown. The cool water was a blessing on her soot-stained skin. Olivia scrubbed as best she could without fully undressing, promising herself a proper bath when she had more privacy and strength. The borrowed clothes were too large but clean, and rolling up the sleeves and pant legs made them serviceable enough. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Nathan at the stove, stirring something in a large pot. He glanced up, a hint of surprise crossing his features before he smiled. "You look better," he said. "Got some color back in your face." "I feel better," Olivia admitted, self-consciously adjusting the oversized shirt. "Thank you for the clothes." "They're not exactly the height of fashion," Nathan said with a slight smile, "but they'll do until we can get you proper things." Carlos's wife left some things behind when they moved here from Texas. He says you're welcome to whatever fits. That's very kind of him, Olivia said, moving closer to the stove. May I help with anything? Nathan hesitated, then nodded toward a loaf of bread on the table. You could slice that if you're feeling up to it. Stew's almost ready. Working together in the small kitchen created a strange sense of domestic normalcy that Olivia hadn't experienced since Timothy's death. They moved around each other carefully, with the awkwardness of strangers, yet the shared purpose of a simple meal. Carlos joined them for supper, bringing a bottle of whiskey that Nathan declined but Olivia accepted in small measure, letting the burn chase away the last of the chill that seemed to have settled in her bones since the fire. The men kept the conversation light, telling stories about the ranch and the surrounding area that required little input from Olivia but included her nonetheless. After the meal, Carlos bid them goodnight and returned to his cabin. Nathan poured coffee and settled into a chair by the fire, which he'd lit against the evening's cooling air. You should know, he said after a moment of comfortable silence, I'll be riding into Silver Creek in 2 days for supplies. You're welcome to come along, see about contacting any family or friends who might help. Olivia stared into her coffee cup. I don't have any family. My parents died years ago and I was an only child. Timothy had a brother back east, but we weren't close. What about your land, the homestead? The claim was in Timothy's name. Olivia felt a familiar bitterness rise. After he died, I petitioned to have it transferred to me, but there were complications. I was working through them with a lawyer in Silver Creek, but now, she trailed off, the reality of her situation hitting her anew. Without proof of her claim documents that had been lost in the fire, and without the cabin as evidence of her continued occupation, her right to the land was tenuous at best. Nathan seemed to understand the implications without her having to explain further. I know Judge Wilson in Silver Creek. He's fair-minded, might be worth talking to him about your situation. Perhaps, Olivia agreed, though she felt little hope. Women alone had few rights in the territories, a reality she'd been fighting since Timothy's death. But I won't impose on your hospitality for long. Once I'm stronger, I can find work in town. There's always need for someone who can cook and clean. Nathan studied her over the rim of his cup. There's no rush, he said finally. Winter's still months away. You have time to consider your options. The simple statement, the gift of time without pressure, brought unexpected tears to Olivia's eyes. She blinked them away quickly, unwilling to appear more helpless than she already felt. Thank you, she said simply, hoping he understood the depth of gratitude those 2 words carried. Nathan nodded once, then changed the subject, telling her about his plans to expand the cattle operation if the next spring roundup went well. His voice, low and steady, created a soothing backdrop as the fire crackled and night settled fully over the ranch. When Olivia's eyes began to grow heavy, he noticed immediately. You should rest, he said, rising to take her empty cup. Healing takes energy. That night, lying in Nathan's bed with Sadie curled on the rug beside her, the dog having apparently appointed herself Olivia's guardian, she listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. From beyond the thin walls came the occasional lowing of cattle, the distant howl of a coyote, and the soft creaking of the sofa as Nathan shifted in his sleep. Strange how quickly the human spirit adapted, she thought. Just yesterday, she had been certain she was going to die beside the ruins of her home. Tonight, she was falling asleep in a stranger's bed, wrapped in borrowed clothes with a full stomach and the promise of tomorrow. The next morning, Olivia woke with the dawn, her body following the rhythms of farm life despite her weakness. She found Nathan already up, drinking coffee at the table while reviewing what appeared to be ledgers. Morning, he said, glancing up. Coffee's hot if you want some. How'd you sleep? Better than I have in months, Olivia admitted, moving to pour herself a cup. Her legs felt steadier today, her head clearer. What are you working on? Nathan gestured to the books. Trying to make sense of these accounts. Numbers aren't exactly my strong suit. Olivia hesitated, then asked, May I? Nathan looked surprised but pushed the ledger toward her. Be my guest. Olivia had always had a head for figures. Before marrying Timothy, she'd worked as an assistant to a shopkeeper in St. Louis, keeping his books and inventory. She quickly saw that, while Nathan's ranching skills might be solid, his bookkeeping was haphazard at best. "You're not accounting for all your expenses here," she said, pointing to several entries. "And these sales figures need to be broken down by buyer. It makes it easier to track who pays promptly and who tries to short you." Nathan watched her with growing interest as she explained how he might better organize his accounts. "Sounds like you know your way around a ledger book better than I do," he said when she finished. Olivia blushed slightly. "I used to keep books for a general store. It's just a matter of organization." "Well, if you're looking for a way to earn your keep while you're here, I'd be grateful for the help with these." He tapped the ledgers. "I'd rather be out with the cattle than hunched over these pages any day." The offer was perfectly pitched away for her to contribute that acknowledged her skills rather than treating her as a charity case. "I'd be happy to," she agreed, feeling a small spark of purpose ignite within her. The day passed quickly. While Nathan and Carlos rode out to check on the herd, Olivia rested, organized the ledgers, and even felt strong enough to prepare a simple supper from the supplies in Nathan's pantry. The domestic activity was therapeutic, giving her hands purpose and her mind something to focus on besides her losses. When the men returned in the late afternoon, they seemed pleasantly surprised to find fresh biscuits and a pot of beans with salt pork waiting. Carlos stayed for the meal again, and the conversation flowed more easily than the night before, with Olivia feeling comfortable enough to share some stories of her own. After Carlos left, Nathan helped her clear the table. "You didn't have to cook," he said. "You're supposed to be resting." "Cooking isn't exactly strenuous," Olivia replied. "Besides, it felt good to be useful." Nathan studied her for a moment, then said, "You've got grit, Mrs. Matthews. Most women who'd been through what you have would still be laid up in bed." "Olivia," she corrected him. "And I've never seen the sense in dwelling on what can't be changed. The fire happened. My home is gone. Weeping about it won't bring it back." Nathan's expression softened. "No, it won't, but there's no shame in grief either." The simple acknowledgement permission to feel the pain she'd been holding at bay nearly undid her. She turned away, busying herself with the dishes to hide the sudden sheen of tears. "I'll ride into town tomorrow," Nathan said after a moment, allowing her the dignity of composing herself. "Need to pick up some supplies and send a telegram to a cattle buyer in Billings. You're welcome to come along if you're feeling strong enough." Olivia considered the offer. Part of her wanted to avoid town, to delay facing the reality of her situation and the inevitable questions about her future. But she knew she couldn't hide at Nathan's ranch forever. "Yes," she decided. "I should speak with Judge Wilson about my land claim if possible." "We'll leave after breakfast then," Nathan said. "It's about a 2-hour ride. Think you can manage it?" Olivia straightened her shoulders. "I'll manage." The next morning dawned clear and cool, perfect for traveling. Nathan had found an old side saddle that had belonged to Carlos's wife, making it possible for Olivia to ride properly despite wearing trousers. He'd also given her a wide-brimmed hat to protect her face from the sun and a light jacket against the morning chill. As they rode side by side along the trail to Silver Creek, Olivia found herself studying Nathan when he wasn't looking. There was an ease to the way he sat a horse, a natural grace that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. His profile against the morning sky was strong, his expression thoughtful as he scanned the horizon, a habit, she guessed, of a man accustomed to watching for signs of trouble. "Have you always been a rancher?" she asked, breaking a comfortable silence. Nathan glanced at her, then back at the trail. "No, grew up on a farm in Missouri, came west after the war, tried my hand at a few things before settling on cattle." "You fought in the war?" Olivia asked, noting that he would have been very young when the conflict ended. "Last year of it," Nathan confirmed. "Joined up at 17, saw enough to know I didn't want to see more." His tone discouraged further questions on that topic. "What about you? Always been a homesteader?" Olivia shook her head. "I grew up in St. Louis. My father was a printer. After he and my mother died of influenza, I worked in a shop until I met Timothy. He had dreams of the West, land of our own." She smiled sadly at the memory. "I was 19 and thought he hung the moon." "He must have been a good man," Nathan said quietly. "He was," Olivia agreed. "Stubborn as a mule and too quick to trust, but kind. Always kind." They fell silent again, the rhythm of the horses' hooves marking time as the trail wound through stands of pine and across small streams. Olivia found herself relaxing into the journey, her body remembering the motions of riding even after days of weakness. "There it is," Nathan said eventually, gesturing toward a cluster of buildings that had appeared in the distance. "Silver Creek, not much to look at, but it serves its purpose." As they rode into town, Olivia felt the curious stares of the townspeople. A woman in men's clothing, riding alongside one of the local ranchers, was bound to cause talk. She held her head high, reminding herself that gossip was the least of her concerns now. Nathan helped her dismount in front of the general store, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "I need to stop at the telegraph office and the bank," he said. "Judge Wilson's office is at the end of the street, next to the land office. Want me to walk you there?" Olivia appreciated the offer but shook her head. "I can manage. I should speak with him alone anyway." Nathan nodded, understanding her need to handle her affairs independently. "I'll meet you back here in an hour or so. Take your time." As she walked down the dusty main street, Olivia was acutely aware of her appearance, a woman in borrowed men's clothes, still bearing the signs of her ordeal. But the urgency of her situation overrode any concerns about propriety. She needed to secure her land rights, or whatever might be salvaged of them. Judge Wilson's office was a small, neat building with a shingle outside announcing Wilson & Wilson, attorneys and notary public. Olivia took a deep breath and entered, the bell above the door announcing her arrival. A young clerk looked up from his desk, his expression shifting from professional interest to surprise as he took in her appearance. "May I help you, madam? I need to speak with Judge Wilson regarding a land claim," Olivia said firmly. "I'm Olivia Matthews." Recognition dawned in the clerk's eyes. "Mrs. Matthews, yes, we heard about the fire, terrible business. Let me see if the judge is available." He disappeared through a door at the back, returning moments later. "The judge will see you now." Judge Ezekiel Wilson was a tall, thin man with a neatly trimmed white beard and sharp blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He rose as Olivia entered his office, gesturing for her to take a seat across from his desk. "Mrs. Matthews," he said, his voice grave. "I'm very sorry to hear about your misfortune. Sheriff Barnes mentioned it when he rode past your property 2 days ago." "Thank you, Judge Wilson," Olivia said, sitting straight in the chair. "I've come about my land claim. As you know, it was in my husband's name, and we were in the process of transferring it to me after his death." The judge's expression grew concerned. "Yes, I remember the case. There was some dispute with the Territorial Land Office about a widow's right to inherit a homestead claim. All the documentation was lost in the fire," Olivia continued, "including the proof of my continuous occupation of the land for the past 2 years. Judge Wilson steepled his fingers, his brow furrowed. "That does complicate matters, without those papers and with the cabin now destroyed." He paused delicately. "The law requires visible improvements and continuous occupation to maintain a claim. Your current situation makes both problematic." Olivia felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. "Are you saying I've lost my claim to the land?" "Not necessarily," the judge said cautiously, "but you would need to rebuild the cabin and resume occupation within a reasonable time frame. The land office might grant an extension given the circumstances, but—" He hesitated again. "Forgive me for asking, Mrs. Matthews, but do you have the resources to rebuild?" The question struck at the heart of Olivia's dilemma. Her savings had been modest to begin with, and most had been spent on supplies for the winter ahead, supplies now reduced to ash. "I have some funds in the bank," she said, unwilling to admit the full extent of her financial distress to this man who, though sympathetic, represented the very system that made her position so precarious. "And I'm exploring other options." Judge Wilson nodded, though his expression suggested he understood more than she was saying. "I'll write to the Territorial Land Office on your behalf, explaining the situation. In the meantime, I suggest you file a formal statement with my clerk, documenting the fire and your intentions regarding the property." It wasn't much, but it was something, a small legal foothold that might prevent the immediate loss of her claim. Olivia spent the next half hour providing a detailed statement to the clerk. answering his questions with as much precision as she could manage. When she finally emerged from the office, she found Nathan waiting outside, leaning against a hitching post with his hat tipped low over his eyes. He straightened as she approached, his expression questioning. "How did it go?" he asked. Olivia sighed. "About as well as could be expected. I haven't lost the claim yet, but without rebuilding quickly, I likely will." Nathan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Let's get those supplies and head back. We can talk more at the ranch." The general store was busy with the usual Saturday crowd. Olivia felt the curious stares and whispered comments as she followed Nathan through the aisles, helping him select the items on his list. The storekeeper, a round man with bushy sideburns named Mr. Hollister, greeted them with undisguised interest. "Rutherford," he said, nodding to Nathan before turning to Olivia. "And Mrs. Matthews, heard about your trouble. Terrible thing, a fire." "Yes, it was," Olivia replied simply, unwilling to provide fodder for the town gossips. Mr. Hollister seemed disappointed by her brevity but recovered quickly. "Well, if there's anything you need, you just let me know. We extend credit to established customers." "Thank you," Olivia said, though she knew she was in no position to take on debt. "Actually, there is something. Do you have any women's clothing? Mine was lost in the fire." The storekeeper brightened. "Indeed we do. Just got in some ready-made dresses last week. Nothing fancy, mind you, but sturdy and decent." He led her to a small section at the back of the store where several dresses hung on a rack. The selection was limited, but Olivia was in no position to be choosy. She selected 2 simple cotton dresses, one brown, one blue, along with necessary underthings, a nightgown, and a pair of serviceable boots. When Nathan insisted on adding the items to his own purchases, Olivia tried to protest. "I can't let you do that. You've already done so much." "Consider it an advance," Nathan said quietly, so only she could hear. "For helping with my accounts, you can pay me back when you're on your feet again." It was a face-saving gesture, allowing her to accept the help without feeling like a complete charity case. Olivia nodded gratefully, understanding the kindness behind his offer. As Mr. Hollister wrapped their purchases, the door to the store opened, admitting a well-dressed man in his 50s, accompanied by a younger man who bore a strong resemblance to him. The older man's eyes narrowed when he spotted Nathan. "Rutherford," he said, his tone noticeably cooler than the storekeeper's had been. "Hargrove," Nathan replied with a slight nod, his own expression hardening. The tension between the two men was palpable. Olivia glanced between them, wondering at the source of the obvious animosity. "Still running that pitiful excuse for a ranch, I see," Hargrove continued, making no attempt to hide his disdain. "Though I hear you've taken in strays now." His gaze flicked dismissively toward Olivia. Nathan's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. "Mrs. Matthews is a neighbor who's fallen on hard times, something a decent person might show some respect for." Hargrove sniffed. "Decent people maintain their property properly so it doesn't burn down around their ears." Olivia felt the blood drain from her face at the cruel remark. Nathan took a step forward, his hand dropping instinctively to his side where his gun would normally be, but he'd left it with his horse, as was customary in town. "That's enough, Hargrove," Mr. Hollister interjected, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation in his store. "Mrs. Matthews has suffered a terrible misfortune. There's no call for such talk." Hargrove held Nathan's gaze for a moment longer before turning away with a dismissive shrug. "Come, Vernon, we have actual business to conduct." As the two men moved to the other side of the store, Nathan placed a protective hand at the small of Olivia's back, guiding her toward the door. "Let's go," he said quietly. "Our business here is done." Outside, as they secured their purchases to the horses, Olivia couldn't contain her curiosity. "Who was that man?" Nathan's expression was grim. "Edward Hargrove. Owns the biggest cattle operation in the county, and he's been trying to buy up every small ranch around, including mine. The young one is his son, Vernon, cut from the same cloth as his father. He seemed to have a particular dislike for you," Olivia observed, Nathan's mouth twisted in a humorless smile. "I've refused to sell to him 3 times now. And last spring, I outbid him on a piece of land with water rights he wanted. He doesn't take rejection well." They mounted their horses and started the journey back to the ranch, the encounter in the store casting a shadow over what had otherwise been a productive trip. As they rode, Olivia found herself reflecting on the complex web of relationships and power struggles that defined life in these territories, struggles that had just become even more complicated for her. "What will you do about your land?" Nathan asked after they'd ridden in silence for several miles. "Judge Wilson give you any options?" Olivia sighed. "He said I need to rebuild and resume occupation to maintain my claim, but without funds." She shook her head. "I may have to sell if I can find a buyer willing to pay a fair price for unimproved land." Nathan was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "There's another option you might consider." Olivia looked at him questioningly. "You could stay on at the ranch," he continued. "Not just to recover, but longer term. The books need proper keeping, and I could use help with 100 other things. It wouldn't be charity, you'd earn your way with honest work." The offer took Olivia by surprise. She'd been expecting to move on once she regained her strength, perhaps to find work in Silver Creek, or even to travel to a larger town where a woman alone might find more opportunities. "That's very generous," she said slowly, "but I wouldn't want to intrude on your life indefinitely." Nathan's expression was earnest. "It's not intrusion if you're invited, and it's not entirely selfless on my part. You've already shown you have skills I need. The ranch would benefit from your presence." Olivia considered his words. The offer was tempting, a chance to stay in the country she'd grown to love, to contribute meaningfully to a working ranch, to have time to consider her future without the immediate pressure of homelessness. "I'll think about it," she promised. "But first, let me work off the cost of these clothes and my keep for a few weeks. Then we can discuss a more permanent arrangement." Nathan nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. "Fair enough." As they continued toward the ranch, the sun beginning its descent toward the western mountains, Olivia felt a curious mixture of emotions. Grief for all she had lost still lingered, but alongside, it grew something unexpected, a tentative hope for what might lie ahead. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that brought Olivia an unexpected sense of peace. Each morning she rose with the dawn, preparing breakfast while Nathan and Carlos tended to the early chores. She spent her mornings organizing Nathan's accounts, creating a proper bookkeeping system that revealed the ranch was modestly profitable, but could be more so with better financial management. In the afternoons, as her strength returned, she began helping with lighter ranch work, gathering eggs from the small chicken coop, tending the kitchen garden Carlos had started, and learning to care for the horses under Nathan's patient instruction. The men never treated her as fragile or incapable, for which Olivia was grateful. They showed her how to do unfamiliar tasks, then stepped back to let her learn through doing, offering advice only when needed. In return, Olivia brought order to the domestic side of ranch life, which had clearly been neglected in the absence of a woman's touch. She mended clothes, prepared hearty meals, and even began making small improvements to the cabin's interior, hanging curtains fashioned from flour sacks, arranging wildflowers in tin cans, creating beauty from simplicity as women on the frontier had always done. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Sometimes Carlos joined them, bringing his guitar and playing melancholy Spanish tunes. Other times, it was just Olivia and Nathan, sitting in companionable silence or engaged in conversation that ranged from practical ranch matters to more personal topics. Olivia learned that Nathan had lost his parents young, raised by an uncle who had taught him ranching before the war claimed him. He'd fought for the Union, though many of his Missouri neighbors had sided with the Confederacy, creating tensions that made returning home difficult after the fighting ended. He drifted west, working as a cowhand on various ranches before saving enough to claim his own land. "I never thought I'd put down roots again," he admitted one evening as they watched stars appear in the darkening sky. "After the war, seemed easier to keep moving, but something about this place," he gestured to the land spreading out before them, "felt right from the first time I saw it." Olivia understood that feeling. She'd experienced it herself when she and Timothy first arrived at their homestead, a sense of recognition, of belonging, as though the land had been waiting for them. "Do you miss it?" Nathan asked. "Your place, I mean." Olivia considered the question carefully. "I miss what it represented: independence, the life Timothy and I planned together. But the land itself," she shook her head slightly. "It was never truly mine, not in the eyes of the law, always conditional, always threatened." Nathan's expression grew thoughtful. "That's the thing about land out here. Papers say one thing, but the earth itself doesn't care about human claims. Been here long before us, will be here long after." It was a strangely comforting perspective, the idea that the land endured regardless of who temporarily claimed ownership. Olivia found herself relaxing into the notion that perhaps her worth wasn't tied to a specific piece of property, that she could belong elsewhere. As weeks passed, she became increasingly aware of a shifting dynamic between herself and Nathan. Their conversations grew longer, their silences more comfortable. She began to notice the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, how his hand would linger just a moment when helping her onto a horse, the careful attention he paid when she spoke about matters large or small. For his part, Nathan seemed to find more reasons to be near the cabin during the day, to ask her opinion on ranch decisions, to share small discoveries: a hawk's nest in the tall pine behind the barn, the first ripe berries along the creek bank, a particularly spectacular sunset. These gestures, never intrusive but increasingly frequent, spoke to an interest that went beyond mere friendship or employer-employee relations. Olivia wasn't blind to these developments, nor to her own response. She found herself taking extra care with her appearance each morning, looking forward to their evening conversations, feeling a flutter of anticipation when she heard his boots on the porch steps. It had been over 2 years since Timothy's death, and while she had never expected to feel this kind of interest in another man, she couldn't deny the growing warmth Nathan's presence inspired. But along with these pleasant feelings came guilt and uncertainty. Was she betraying Timothy's memory by developing feelings for another man? Was it too soon? And even if it wasn't, could she trust these emotions, born as they were from a situation of extreme vulnerability? Would she have felt the same had she met Nathan under different circumstances, when she wasn't dependent on his generosity? These questions troubled her enough that she found herself creating subtle distance between them, retreating slightly from the easy companionship they'd established. Nathan noticed he was too perceptive not to, but he respected her withdrawal, never pressing for explanations or making demands. Nearly a month after the fire, Olivia received a letter from Judge Wilson. The Territorial Land Office had granted her a 6-month extension on her claim, acknowledging the exceptional circumstances of the fire. If she could rebuild and resume occupation within that time frame, her rights to the land would be preserved. She read the letter twice, sitting at the kitchen table while Nathan worked outside. It should have been welcome news, a chance to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Instead, she felt a curious hollowness, as though the prize she'd been fighting for had somehow diminished in importance. When Nathan came in for the midday meal, she showed him the letter. He read it carefully, his expression unreadable. "That's good news," he said finally, returning the paper to her. "Gives you options." "Yes," Olivia agreed, though her tone lacked conviction. "Options?" Nathan studied her face. "You don't sound pleased," Olivia sighed, folding the letter and placing it in her pocket. "I should be. I've been fighting for this land for 2 years, but now—" She hesitated, unsure how to express the confusion she felt. "Now you're wondering if it's worth fighting for," Nathan finished for her. She nodded, grateful for his understanding. "Is that disloyal, do you think? To Timothy's memory, to all we worked for?" Nathan considered the question seriously. "I think holding on to something just because it's what you've always done isn't loyalty, it's habit. Real loyalty means honoring what mattered to someone, not necessarily the specific way they went about it. And what mattered to Timothy was building a life," Olivia said slowly. "Not necessarily that particular piece of land. Only you can know that for certain," Nathan replied. "But from what you've told me about him, he wanted your happiness above all else." The simple observation brought tears to Olivia's eyes. It was true Timothy had been ambitious and determined, but never at the expense of her well-being. He would have wanted her to find security and contentment, however that might look. "I need time to think," she said, wiping away a stray tear. 6 months is a gift in that way. "I don't have to decide everything today," Nathan nodded. "Take all the time you need. Your place here is secure regardless." The reassurance meant more than he could know. It created space for Olivia to consider her future based on what she truly wanted, not just what circumstances forced upon her. That evening, after supper was cleared away, Nathan surprised her by asking if she'd like to ride out to see a special spot on the ranch, a place, he said, that few people knew about. "It's not far," he added when she hesitated. "And the moon's nearly full, perfect night for it." Curiosity overcame caution. "All right," Olivia agreed. "Let me get my shawl." They rode side by side through moonlit pastures, following a narrow trail that wound up into the foothills beyond the main grazing lands. The night was alive with sounds: crickets chirping, the occasional hoot of an owl, the soft footfalls of their horses on the earthen path. Above them, stars crowded the sky, impossibly bright and numerous. After about 20 minutes, they reached a small plateau overlooking the valley. Nathan dismounted and helped Olivia down, tethering the horses to a nearby pine. He led her to the edge of the clearing, where the view opened up before them like a painting. The ranch lay below, the cabin and barn tiny in the distance. Beyond that, the rolling prairie stretched toward the horizon, silvered by moonlight. The mountains rose to the west, their peaks still capped with snow even in summer. It was breathtaking, wild, and peaceful all at once. "I found this place my first week here," Nathan said, his voice soft in the night air. "Come up whenever I need to think or just be." Olivia understood the impulse. There was something about the expansive view that put human concerns into perspective, making them seem both significant and small at the same time. "It's beautiful," she said simply, wrapping her shawl more tightly around her shoulders against the cool night air. Nathan moved closer, his shoulder nearly touching hers as they stood side by side. "I've never brought anyone else up here before," he admitted. The confession hung between them, laden with meaning. Olivia turned to look at him, finding his eyes already on her face, searching. In the moonlight, his features were softened, the usual weathered lines smoothed away. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's gaze didn't waver. "Because when I'm with you, Olivia, I feel like I'm home, not just at the ranch, but home." He gestured toward his chest. "Here," the words resonated deep within her, touching a longing she'd barely acknowledged even to herself. Since Timothy's death, she'd been surviving, enduring, rarely living fully in the moment. With Nathan, she'd begun to feel present again, engaged with life rather than merely passing through it. "I know it hasn't been long," Nathan continued when she remained silent. "And I know you're still figuring out your path forward. I'm not asking for promises, just honesty. Is there a chance you might feel something similar?" Olivia took a deep breath, knowing she owed him the truth. "Yes," she said softly. "There's a chance, more than a chance." She looked out over the moonlit landscape, gathering her thoughts. "But I'm afraid, Nathan, afraid of making decisions based on gratitude or necessity rather than what's truly in my heart." Nathan nodded, accepting her concerns without defensiveness. "That's fair and wise." He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I didn't feel this way when I first found you by your cabin. Respect, yes, compassion, certainly, but this," he gestured between them, "this came later. When I got to know you, your strength, your determination, the way you face each day on your own terms." His words eased something in Olivia's chest, the fear that his interest stemmed from pity or some misguided sense of chivalry rather than genuine appreciation of who she was. "Thank you for telling me that," she said. "It helps." Nathan smiled, the expression warming his entire face. "Good, because I'm not a man who speaks of such things easily, and I may not say it all again so well." The self-deprecating humor broke the tension, and Olivia found herself laughing. "Then I shall commit it to memory." They stayed a while longer, talking easily about lighter matters: the progress of the new calves, Carlos's plans to visit family in Texas come winter, the wild plum trees near the creek that would soon be bearing fruit. When the night air grew too chill, they reluctantly mounted their horses for the ride back. As they approached the cabin, its windows glowing with the lamplight Carlos had thoughtfully left burning, Olivia felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This place, which had begun as a temporary refuge, had become something more a haven, yes, but also a place of possibility, of new beginnings. Before they reached the yard, she reined her horse to a stop. Nathan halted beside her, questioning. "I've made a decision," Olivia said, her voice steady in the darkness. "I'm going to sell my claim." Nathan's surprise was evident even in the dim light. "Are you sure? You don't have to decide tonight." "I'm sure," Olivia replied. "That land was part of a life I tried to hold onto out of duty. It's time to let it go, to build something new instead of trying to preserve something that's already gone." Nathan was quiet for a moment, absorbing her words. "What will you do instead?" Olivia took a deep breath. "I'd like to stay here if your offer still stands, not just for a while, but to see where this might lead, between us." The smile that spread across Nathan's face was answer enough, but his words confirmed it. "The offer stands for as long as you want it." They rode the remaining distance to the cabin side by side, their horses close enough that their legs occasionally brushed. It was a small contact, innocent enough, but it carried the promise of greater intimacy to come, not rushed, not desperate, but unfolding naturally as their relationship deepened. The following week saw a transformation in both Olivia and the ranch. With her decision made, she threw herself into ranch life with renewed energy. She rode into Silver Creek with Nathan to file the paperwork officially relinquishing her homestead claim, using the small sum she received from the land office to purchase fabric for proper curtains, seeds for an expanded garden, and a few feminine touches to soften the cabin's rustic interior. The relationship between her and Nathan evolved slowly, respectfully. Their evening conversations grew longer, more personal. Occasional touches his hand at her waist as they passed in the narrow kitchen, her fingers brushing his when passing a cup of coffee became more frequent, more deliberate. Their first kiss came naturally one evening as they sat on the porch watching a summer storm roll across the prairie, the air electric with anticipation. Carlos observed these developments with quiet approval, tactfully finding reasons to be elsewhere in the evenings and on Sundays. "My mother always said a house needs both a man and a woman to be complete," he told Olivia one morning as they worked together in the garden. "Nate is a good man. He deserves happiness." "And what about you?" Olivia asked, curious about this man who had become something of a brother to her. "Don't you want a family of your own?" Carlos smiled wistfully. "Someday, perhaps. There's a widow in Silver Creek, Senora Diaz. She has a small restaurant. We have been talking." His slight blush told Olivia there was more to the story than mere conversation. As summer gave way to fall, the ranch prepared for winter. Nathan and Carlos rode out daily to check the herd, moving cattle to sheltered pastures and ensuring feed stores were adequate for the coming cold months. Olivia preserved vegetables from the garden, dried herbs for winter cooking and medicine, and helped with the butchering when a steer was slaughtered for winter meat. It was hard work, but deeply satisfying. For the first time since Timothy's death, Olivia felt truly part of something, not just maintaining what was, but building toward a future. And at the center of that future, increasingly, was Nathan. Their growing closeness was not without challenges. They were both independent people accustomed to making their own decisions, which sometimes led to clashes over ranch matters. Nathan's protective instincts occasionally chafed against Olivia's determination to pull her full weight in all aspects of ranch work. They learned to navigate these differences through honest conversation, developing a partnership that balanced their respective strengths. In late October, they rode into Silver Creek together for the small harvest festival the town held each year. It was the first time they'd appeared publicly as a couple, and Olivia was acutely aware of the curious glances and whispered comments as they walked among the food stalls and games set up in the town square. Most people were welcoming, if obviously curious about the nature of their relationship. Mrs. Hollister from the general store made a point of introducing Olivia to several other ranchers' wives, creating connections that helped her feel less isolated. The local schoolteacher, a young woman named Miss Peabody, eagerly discussed books with Olivia, promising to lend her some novels to pass the winter evenings. Not all reactions were positive, however. Edward Hargrove and his son Vernon made a point of cutting them directly, turning away when Nathan attempted a polite greeting. Later, Olivia overheard two women whispering behind their hands, speculating unkindly about how quickly she had moved from one man's bed to another. The comments stung, bringing a flush of shame to Olivia's cheeks despite the unfairness of the judgment. She had been a widow for 2 years, had maintained her propriety even while living under Nathan's roof, and yet still faced the harsh standards applied to women in these small communities. Nathan noticed her discomfort and followed her gaze to the gossiping women who quickly looked away. "Don't let them bother you," he said quietly. "Small minds always find something to criticize." "It's not just that," Olivia replied, keeping her voice low. "It's the double standard. If our situations were reversed, if you were the widower who'd found shelter with a woman rancher, no one would think twice about it." Nathan couldn't deny the truth of her observation. "People will talk regardless of what we do. All that matters is that we know the truth of things between us." His matter-of-fact acceptance of the situation helped ease Olivia's discomfort. By the time they joined the community dance in the evening, she had set aside her concerns enough to enjoy the festivities. Nathan proved to be a surprisingly good dancer, guiding her through lively reels and thoughtful waltzes with equal skill. As they rode home under a canopy of stars, the crisp autumn air carrying the scent of pine and wood smoke, Olivia felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in years. Whatever challenges lay ahead, winter storms, difficult cattle markets, small town gossip, they would face them together. Winter descended on the ranch with a fury that surprised even Nathan, who had weathered several Montana winters already. Snow piled high around the cabin, and temperatures dropped so low that water froze in buckets inside the house. The cattle required constant attention, with Nathan and Carlos riding out daily to break ice on water holes and distribute hay to the herd. Olivia's days were filled with maintaining the household against the cold, keeping the fire stoked, preparing hearty meals to sustain the men through their frigid work, mending clothes worn threadbare by harsh conditions. She learned to knit from a book Nathan had ordered for her from a catalog, producing woolen scarves and mittens that proved essential in the bitter cold. The isolation of winter brought its own challenges and rewards. Cut off from town except for occasional necessary trips, the 3 inhabitants of the ranch grew closer, spending evenings playing cards, telling stories, or simply sitting by the fire while Carlos played his guitar. Nathan taught Olivia to play chess, revealing a strategic mind that explained much about his success as a rancher despite his haphazard bookkeeping. It was during one such evening in early December, with snow falling heavily outside and the wind howling around the cabin's eaves, that Nathan surprised Olivia with a question she hadn't expected so soon. "I've been thinking," he said as they sat before the fire, the chessboard between them forgotten as they talked, "about spring and what comes next." Olivia looked up from her knitting, curious. "What about it?" Nathan seemed uncharacteristically nervous, his usual confidence replaced with a hesitancy she rarely saw. "I know we haven't known each other all that long, not even a full year yet, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He reached across the space between them, taking her hand. "I love you, Olivia. I want to build a life with you, not just as we are now, but properly, as husband and wife." Though she had begun to suspect his feelings ran in this direction, the directness of his proposal took Olivia's breath away. She sat very still, her heart hammering in her chest. "I know it's sudden," Nathan continued when she didn't immediately respond, "and I don't expect an answer tonight. Just think about it." He squeezed her hand gently. "You brought something to this ranch to my life that I never knew was missing. I don't want to lose that." Olivia found her voice at last. "I don't need time to think," she said softly. "I know my heart, Nathan. I love you too. Yes, I'll marry you." The joy that transformed his face was something Olivia knew she would remember for the rest of her life. He rose from his chair, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. Their kiss was tender at first, then deepening with a passion that had been carefully restrained during the months of their courtship. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I don't have a ring," he admitted. "Haven't been able to get to town with this weather." Olivia smiled, touching his face gently. "I don't need a ring, just you and this life we're building." They agreed to marry as soon as weather permitted travel to Silver Creek, where Judge Wilson could perform the ceremony. In the meantime, they maintained their separate sleeping arrangements out of respect for propriety, though the knowledge of their engagement created a new undercurrent of anticipation in their daily interactions. Carlos was delighted by the news, insisting on opening his last bottle of tequila to celebrate. "I knew from the beginning," he declared, raising his glass in a toast. "The way you looked at each other like two people seeing sunlight after a long storm." The poetic observation surprised both Nathan and Olivia, who exchanged amused glances. It seemed their developing feelings had been obvious to everyone but themselves. Christmas came and went quietly, marked by simple gifts exchanged before the fire. A new hat Olivia had secretly ordered for Nathan through Mr. Hollister. A beautiful shawl Nathan had purchased during his last trip to town before the heavy snows, and hand-carved wooden figures from Carlos that revealed an artistic talent neither had suspected. January brought the worst of the winter weather, with a blizzard that kept them housebound for nearly a week. The forced confinement tested everyone's patience, but it also provided time for planning. Olivia and Nathan discussed expanding the cabin in the spring, adding a proper bedroom and enlarging the kitchen. They talked about increasing the herd size, perhaps branching into horses as well as cattle. Each conversation wove their futures more tightly together, creating a shared vision that sustained them through the dark winter days. By mid-February, a brief thaw made the trail to Silver Creek passable. Nathan was eager to make the journey, both to replenish supplies and to arrange their wedding with Judge Wilson. Olivia, however, insisted on accompanying him despite the difficult conditions. "I need a proper dress," she declared when Nathan tried to convince her to stay behind where it was warm and safe. "I'm not getting married in borrowed clothes or one of my everyday dresses." Recognizing the determination in her eyes, Nathan relented. They set out early one morning, bundled against the cold, with Carlos promising to tend things at the ranch during their overnight absence. The journey was more challenging than their summer rides had been, with patches of ice and mud slowing their progress. But the sight of Silver Creek appearing through the bare trees brought a sense of accomplishment and anticipation. They stabled their horses at the town livery and made their way to Judge Wilson's office first to ensure he would be available for a ceremony the following day. The judge welcomed them warmly, congratulating them on their engagement and readily agreeing to perform the ceremony. "Small wedding or a larger affair?" he asked. "Mrs. Wilson would be happy to help with arrangements if you're thinking of something more elaborate." Olivia and Nathan exchanged glances, having already discussed this matter. "Simple and small," Nathan replied. "Just a few friends, if any are in town." "Tomorrow at noon, then," the judge confirmed. "In my office, unless you'd prefer the church." "Your office will be perfect," Olivia assured him. Their next stop was the general store, where Olivia hoped to find a suitable dress for the occasion. Mrs. Hollister, delighted by the news of their engagement, took Olivia under her wing immediately. "I have just the thing," she declared, leading Olivia to a corner where better quality goods were displayed. "Ordered it for the mayor's daughter, but she changed her mind and wanted something fancier from back east. Been sitting here for months." The dress she produced was ivory rather than white, with a modest neckline and delicate embroidery around the collar and cuffs. It was simple but elegant, and when Olivia tried it on in the small back room, she was pleased to find it needed only minor alterations to fit perfectly. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Hollister declared, her eyes misty. "Like a proper bride should." The words stirred unexpected emotion in Olivia. Her first wedding had been a rushed affair, performed by a justice of the peace with only Timothy's business partner as witness. There had been no special dress, no celebration, just the practical joining of two lives for the journey west. This time would be different. Though still simple by Eastern standards, This wedding would have the elements that mattered most friends to witness their vows: a proper dress, a man she had grown to love deeply standing beside her. Nathan, meanwhile, purchased a new shirt and had his good pants pressed by the local Chinese laundry. He also visited the jeweler, returning to their room at the small hotel with a simple gold band that he presented to Olivia with endearing nervousness. "It's not fancy," he apologized. "But it's solid gold, should last a lifetime." Olivia slipped it onto her finger, finding it fit perfectly. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. She had removed Timothy's ring months ago, storing it in a small box with his letters and the few mementos that had survived the fire. That chapter of her life was complete, honored but not binding her to the past. The next morning dawned clear and cold, with sunshine glinting off the snow-covered buildings of Silver Creek. Olivia dressed carefully in her new gown, arranging her hair in a simple but elegant style and pinning a small bunch of dried flowers Mrs. Hollister had provided to her bodice. When she looked in the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. Gone was the desperate woman who had collapsed beside a burned cabin less than a year ago, replaced by someone with clear eyes and a hopeful heart. Nathan met her in the hotel lobby, his expression of awe when he saw her more meaningful than any elaborate compliment could have been. "You're beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. They walked together through the snow-lined streets to Judge Wilson's office, where they found a small gathering already assembled. Mrs. Wilson had decorated the space with evergreen boughs and candles, creating a festive atmosphere despite the modest surroundings. Carlos was there, having ridden in that morning, alongside Mrs. Hollister, the schoolteacher Miss Peabody, and several other townspeople who had become friends during Olivia's visits. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. Judge Wilson spoke eloquently about the purpose of marriage not just as a legal contract, but as a partnership of equals, facing life's challenges and joys together. Nathan and Olivia exchanged simple vows, promising to love, honor, and support one another through whatever lay ahead. When Nathan slipped the gold band onto Olivia's finger, and Judge Wilson pronounced them husband and wife, the small gathering broke into applause. Carlos stepped forward first to congratulate them, his usual reserve breaking as he embraced them both. "Now the ranch truly has a mistress," he declared, "and a master who will smile more often." A small reception followed at the hotel dining room where Mrs. Wilson had arranged for cake and punch to be served. The celebration was modest but joyful, with none of the stiffness or formality that often characterized such occasions in larger towns. Even Mr. Hargrove's absence, a deliberate slight that might once have bothered Nathan, seemed inconsequential in the face of their happiness. As the afternoon waned, Nathan and Olivia thanked their guests and prepared to return to the ranch. Though the hotel had offered them a special rate for a wedding night stay, both were eager to begin their married life in the home they already shared. The ride back was quiet, the winter landscape peaceful around them as they traveled side by side. Olivia's new dress was carefully packed away, replaced by her practical riding clothes, but the gold band on her finger caught the late afternoon sunlight, a tangible reminder of the commitment they had made. When they crested the final rise and the ranch came into view, Olivia felt a surge of emotion. This place, which had begun as a refuge in her darkest hour, had become home in every sense of the word. The cabin lights glowed welcomingly in the gathering dusk, smoke rising from the chimney where Carlos had thoughtfully lit a fire before departing for his own cabin to give the newlyweds privacy. Nathan helped Olivia from her horse, but instead of leading her inside immediately, he turned to face the property, his arm around her waist. "I want you to know something," he said, his voice serious. "This is our ranch, now yours and mine equally. I've already spoken to Judge Wilson about adding your name to the deed." Olivia looked up at him in surprise. "Nathan, you don't have to do that. The law be damned," he interrupted gently. "You're my wife, my partner in every sense. What's mine is yours officially and completely." The declaration, so different from the legal battles, she had faced trying to secure Timothy's homestead brought tears to Olivia's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, understanding the significance of his decision in a world where women's property rights were limited and often contested. Nathan brushed away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "No more tears," he said softly, "except happy ones." Then, with a sudden grin that transformed his serious expression, he swept her into his arms. "Now, Mrs. Rutherford, I believe tradition calls for carrying you across the threshold." Olivia laughed as he strode toward the cabin, pushing open the door with his shoulder and carrying her inside with ease. The interior was warm and welcoming. With extra touches, Carlos must have added a bouquet of pine branches in a jar on the table. The best dishes set out. A bottle of wine Nathan had been saving for a special occasion opened to breathe. But these details registered only briefly before Nathan's kiss claimed her attention completely. They had been careful during their courtship, maintaining propriety despite their growing feelings. Now, as husband and wife, that restraint fell away, replaced by the freedom to express their love fully. Later, as they lay together in what was now truly their bed, Olivia rested her head on Nathan's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Outside, snow began to fall again, the soft patter against the window creating a cocoon of privacy around them. "Happy?" Nathan asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Olivia smiled, raising her head to look into his eyes. "More than I ever thought possible again," she answered truthfully. "When I lost everything in that fire, I thought my life was ending. I never imagined it was just beginning." Nathan pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "That's the thing about life out here," he said. "It can take everything from you in an instant, but it can give just as unexpectedly." As they drifted toward sleep, wrapped in each other's warmth against the winter chill, Olivia reflected on the truth of his words. The frontier was harsh and unforgiving, taking lives and livelihoods with brutal indifference. But it also created spaces for new beginnings, for people to reinvent themselves beyond the constraints of established society. She had come west as a young bride, following her first husband's dream. She had endured widowhood, struggled to maintain her independence, and ultimately lost everything to fire. Yet from those ashes had risen something unexpected and precious, a love deeper and more equal than she had known before, a true partnership based on mutual respect and shared purpose. Spring arrived on the ranch with a burst of renewal that seemed to mirror the fresh start in Olivia and Nathan's lives. The snow melted, revealing tender green shoots pushing through the soil. Calves were born, their wobbly legs and curious eyes bringing joy to the long days of ranch work. Nathan and Carlos, with help from neighbors, began the addition to the cabin that would give the newlyweds more space and privacy. Olivia threw herself into making their home truly theirs, planting an expanded garden with vegetables and flowers, preserving the ranch's accounts with meticulous care, and learning more about cattle ranching with each passing day. She discovered she had a particular talent for working with the horses, her gentle patience winning over even the most skittish colts. As the anniversary of the fire approached, Nathan noticed Olivia growing quieter, more reflective. One evening, as they sat on the new porch they had added to the cabin, he took her hand. "Do you want to ride out to your old place tomorrow?" he asked. "It might help to see it to say a proper goodbye." Olivia considered the offer, then nodded. "Yes, I think I would." The next day, they rode together to what had once been Olivia's homestead. The burned remnants of the cabin had been cleared away by someone, probably neighbors, salvaging usable materials, leaving only the stone foundation and chimney as evidence that a home had once stood there. Spring wildflowers grew among the ruins, nature already reclaiming the space. Olivia dismounted, walking slowly around what had been her life with Timothy. She had expected to feel grief, perhaps regret. Instead, she felt a curious peace. This place had been important, a chapter in her life that had shaped her into the woman she now was. But it was no longer home. "Ready to go back?" Nathan asked after she had wandered for a while, gathering a small bouquet of wildflowers. Olivia nodded, taking a final look at the homestead. "Yes," she said. "Let's go home." As they rode back toward their ranch, side by side under the vast Montana sky, Olivia reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. The fire that had seemed like an ending had, in fact, been a beginning. From the ashes of her old life had risen something she could never have imagined that desperate day when Nathan Rutherford had found her starving beside her burned cabin a new home, a new love, and a future filled with promise.